All right, YouTube. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast talking Auburn football down in the Deep South. College football is king, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. It's your boy Kennard Vernon Stewart back again with some more Auburn content as we kind of dig into this quarterback battle. We talked about the running backs the other day to where we talked about Brian Battie. We talked about Jarquez Hunter and where they are with the whole running back situation. But now we're going to transfer over to the quarterback position to where there's been a lot of buzz. There's been a lot of, talk to where Hugh Freeze's mind is not made up after that scrimmage. Because what we thought was going to happen is, okay, you got Robbie Ashford from last year with all the experience that he had, even though thrown in position. You kind of thought it was going to be a two-way battle between Robbie Ashford and Peyton Thorne, but there's a guy that's in the mix that we're going to talk about a little bit later on that has really thrown his name into the hat. So go ahead and like this video. Go ahead and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn as we're trying to get a little bit more consistent with the content. First man up the bat, Robbie Ashford, transfer from Oregon. Now, here's the ironic part about this. He's local talent. He's actually from Hoover High School, a two-sport athlete. Some may argue that he might be a better baseball player than he is a football player. While he was at Oregon, he saw no action as a quarterback in Oregon. But he made 10 starts as an outfielder for Oregon, maybe won a few in all of high school sports to actually be in an Under Armour and All-American game as a football player and as a baseball player. Now, he transitions to Auburn as, if you remember the first couple of games of the season, it's almost like Brian Harsin was kind of playing rock, paper, scissors with the quarterbacks. One series, you got Robbie Ashford. The next series, you got TJ Finley. And it's like, how do the quarterbacks establish any kind of rhythm if every other drive you're taking them out? And leading up to the Penn State game, I'm like, okay, how is this going to work? So, as it turns out, TJ Finley was actually injured in the Penn State game, forcing Robbie Ashford into starting action. I mean, just straight up starting action. Zach Calzada, which seemed like a dummy mission move too, he was injured as he was being. It just that whole thing didn't make sense, but that's for a different video. But anyway, so in the Penn State game, I mean, Robbie Ashford was kind of thrown into action as a starter, would be the starter for the remainder of the season. But Robbie Ashford did have some highlights. I mean, he didn't do absolutely terrible. He had some things that worth noting. Against LSU, 19 for 38 for 337 yards. You talk about a team that went to the SEC championship, and Robbie Ashford had one of his better games. And against Mississippi State, he had 108 rushing yards, which was the best from an Auburn quarterback since my man, Nick Marshall. So the question is on the floor, and I'm going to let y'all answer this in the comment section. Based on what you heard out of this, do you think Robbie Ashford has the chance to start? I mean, heck, he started before. He's done well. Now, the playbook seemed to be a little bit more limited once Brian Harsin was out of the picture. But before then, he at times gave Auburn a chance to win. Now, some people are going to talk about the offensive line. We think that Hugh Freeze has revamped the offensive line. He's basically flipped that thing. He's got some quality guys there. So we'll see where we go from there. Next guy up the bat is my buddy, Peyton Thorne, with 26 career starts for Michigan State. Now, out of all the quarterbacks that are in question for Auburn, he's arguably the most, not even arguably, he's tangibly the most experienced out of the group. He's 16-10 as a starter. He started 26 games. Now, if he would have had another season And if he would have continued the trend as to what he's been able to do up until this point, I mean, there's a case to say that he could be among Michigan State's greatest quarterbacks. 49 career touchdowns, ranks in the top 10 in completion percentage. I mean, I like the fact that he's had 300 plus yards in 10 games. I mean, I think that's pretty remarkable. He's had 10 games with 3 touchdowns or more. I mean, I think that's pretty good. A lot of quarterbacks, you know, can't really argue that they've been able to do that. You're competing against Ohio State, you're competing against Michigan, you're competing against the Big Ten, which a lot of folks will be like, oh, it's the Big Ten, it's not the SEC. Hey, but it's still big time football. You could argue me up and down. I think Ohio State should have beat Georgia this year. So, you can take those apples to the bucket if you want to. I think Ohio State had a really good football team this year. Now, if we are to compare Peyton Thorne to any dual threat quarterback, period, I think we're getting ourselves in a lot of trouble. Because as a runner, in 3 years that he's been a quarterback, he's only had 300 yards rushing, and that's 177 of those came in 1 year. So I think if we're gonna compare him to any, he just is not a threat as a runner. We better, if he's the starter, you better hope like hell he knows how to read defenses and knows how to do just enough to avoid sacks, and maybe every now and then, do a quarterback draw or something of that nature. But as far as being a dual threat quarterback, absolutely not. And I'm not sure what the capability is, but the statistic shows it's not there. I mean, he just can't do it. And one of the factors that may be a problem for Peyton Thorne is statistically, he doesn't show up against the big time opponents. Ranked opponents, under 300 yards, period. Not one game have I seen where Peyton Thorne has thrown over 300 yards against a ranked opponent. As a matter of fact, he doesn't do well in those games. So with the lack of experience in the SEC, you talk about, now I'm not, an SEC homer here, but I do know some of the best talent in the nation, especially on the defensive side of the football field, play in the SEC. They play on the defensive line, they play on the edge, they play linebacker, and they play cornerback and safety. They're some of the best in the country. You look at the NFL rosters, a lot of them are loaded with SEC players. And I'm really interested to see how Peyton Thorne will perform with having limited running ability and maybe a better offensive line. But look, these defensive linemen in the SEC are among the best. So we're going to see how he's able to maneuver through all of that. Now, here's a guy that has recently made Hugh Freeze reevaluate some stuff. Okay? Hugh Freeze went into this offseason. I guarantee you, he's a human being just like me and you. He went in, I'm pretty sure he went into the offseason into the training camp like, look, okay, I'm down to 2 guys. I'm down to Peyton Thorne, and I'm down to Robbie Ashford. Why am I down to these 2 guys? These 2 guys are the most experienced. These 2 guys have the ability to immediately transfer their talent to what we're trying to accomplish this year. And that's kind of what I'm forecasting, But after scrimmages during this offseason, seemed like it's been a change of heart. Holden Geriner, top-rated quarterback out of Savannah, Georgia. He's a state championship winner. As a senior, threw for 3,377 yards and 36 touchdowns. And to top that off, he's a pretty smart guy too. 4.0 grade point average, meaning that he probably catches on fast. Hugh Freeze is very conceptual in how he runs his offense. And Holden Geriner might be a guy that's catching on pretty quick, that's really making some type of move to where he could be an option as a starting quarterback or a strong number two. Maybe a strong enough number two to where if you chip your toenail, he's the starter. Now, here's the drawback I have against this. Holden has not started an SEC football game. He hasn't started as a Power 5 quarterback. There's a lot of pressure going into this season for Hugh Freeze to do well. And Holden will have to catch on pretty quick. Now, he has a little bit of time. He's got UMass the first week, then easing on into the game out in California. To be honest, I think just from a psychological standpoint, like having been a football player before, being thrown into a position, yeah, you've been preparing for it, but as a quarterback, that is the most important position in Power 5 football. We've seen how those positions have made changes in the trajectories of outcomes of teams. And I will reluctantly say we probably could pump the brakes on the whole Holden Geriner thing. But apparently it is a thing because Hugh Freeze is reevaluating who the starting quarterback is going to be and whether Holden Geriner is going to be in the mix. All right, I hope you like this video. Comment and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. I am your host, Kennard Vernon Stewart. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.